In this short video, you will learn what arpeggios are, how to work out every arpeggio type without learning lots of different patterns, and most importantly, how to use them to outline chords in your solos. An arpeggio is often described as a broken chord, or in other words, a chord in which individual notes are played one by one rather than all together. And you would typically play these in order. For example, a simple G major chord, or triad, is made from the first, third, and fifth notes of the G major scale. So starting on a G root note, this would give us the notes G, B, and D. And if we were to play these notes one after the other in a simple pattern, we would end up with a G major arpeggio. And of course, we can extend this by one more octave by playing any remaining roots, thirds, or fifths available within the scale, which would sound like this. If you have any knowledge on how chords are constructed using chord formula, then you can easily adjust certain intervals to form any other arpeggio you like. For example, the only difference between a major triad and a minor triad is the third, which has been flattened. So knowing this, we can now create a minor arpeggio, not by learning a brand new pattern, but by simply lowering the third in our major arpeggio by one fret, which would sound like this. So provided you know the intervals contained within most chord types, you could use this knowledge to create any arpeggio you wish. So perhaps a major 6 arpeggio, which would contain the intervals 1, 3, 5, and 6. Or even a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, which would be 1, flat 3, flat 5, and flat 7. What you should be taking away from this is that a good strong knowledge of intervals will give you every pattern or chord you could possibly need without having to learn countless shapes from books or lessons online. And if you don't know where to start to begin learning this knowledge, then I'll link to a very detailed video that I've made just on this subject at the end of this lesson. Once you understand how to play even the most basic major and minor arpeggios, you can use these now to outline individual chords within a chord progression when soloing, rather than a one-size-fits-all scale, like the guitarist's favourite, the minor pentatonic scale. Take, for example, a chord progression such as G minor, C, C minor, B flat to D. At first, this may sound mechanical, but after you're able to follow a simple chord progression, you can break away from simply ascending and descending arpeggios, and instead use the notes more selectively to highlight each chord just enough to let the listener know which chord you're suggesting in your solo. Now you may have noticed in the previous example that I had to move around the neck a bit too much. This was mainly due to the fact that I was restricting myself to only playing arpeggios starting from an E string root position. While there's nothing inherently wrong with this can be a bit cumbersome and unnecessary, so it's important to at least know your arpeggios from an A string root position also. To do this, simply follow the same steps, either by knowing your major scale starting from an A string root position and selecting the correct intervals, or an even quicker way would be to simply move your existing E string arpeggios over by one string set, and be aware that any notes that fall on the B string of your guitar will have to be raised by one semitone or fret, which would look like this for major arpeggios, and this for minor arpeggios. Using both E and A root position arpeggios together will allow you to solo over chord progressions without needing to move around the neck quite so much, in the same way that when playing a simple chord progression using only bar chords, you could choose to use just one shape and span the fretboard, or play the exact same chords using two different bar chord shapes, reducing movement and keeping the jump between notes in the chords closer for better voice leading. Neither choice is right or wrong, you simply end up with more options when choosing how to navigate the fretboard. For example, a very simple progression such as G, C, D could be played like this, or this. And the same can be said about each chord's arpeggio counterpart. It's worth noting, if you haven't realized already, that within any arpeggio you should be able to see the chord shape within the pattern. For example, a G major arpeggio starting on an E string root note reveals a very familiar G major bar chord shape, while the minor arpeggio starting from the same root note reveals a minor bar chord shape. The same can be seen when visualizing a C major arpeggio starting from an A string root note, which would reveal a standard 5-string bar chord, and also with a C minor arpeggio, which would reveal a 5-string minor bar chord. This of course makes a lot of sense, as an arpeggio is really just the notes of a chord laid out one after the other. So memorizing arpeggios can be made much easier if you can visualize the chord first. This will also help you to land anywhere in the arpeggio you like when soloing, rather than feeling like you have to start from the root note or beginning of a pattern for fear of getting lost. So far within this video we've really only discussed major and minor arpeggios, but of course for any chord that exists, there also is an arpeggio counterpart. So if you wish to understand the building blocks of chord construction, so that you can not only build every chord imaginable, but also as a byproduct every existing arpeggio, then I would strongly suggest watching this video next. As usual, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.